us begin. Okay, so I'm just going to mute everybody. We're on Masechet Beitzah. We got up to Daf Yud Amud Alef. So I want to just go back a little bit. We were talking about, you remember, a seeming contradiction in the approach of Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, right? The first Mishnah of our Masechet told us at the end, we had a din when it comes to shchita, when it comes to slaughtering a chayav ve'of. What happens if you don't have dirt, you've not prepared in order to cover up the blood? Can you still do the shchita or not? So everybody agrees that if you've already done the shchita, you have to cover it up. But if you have not done, and somebody comes to ask and say, I haven't prepared the dirt to cover up the blood, should I do the shchita of the chayav ve'of? So Beit Shammai says yes, go ahead, and Beit Hillel says no, you can't do it. In other words, what we see from that Mishnah is that Beit Shammai are more lenient, so it seems, when it comes to Simchat Yom Tov, that they are willing to waive a rabbinic prohibition, potentially, in order to allow you to do the shchita so that you can have your Simchat Yom Tov. And then we saw our Mishnah relating to birds. Again, I'm not going to go into the whole thing now, but in our Mishnah, it seems to be the precise opposite view. It seems to appear, here we see like we're more accustomed to, they Beit Hillel are more lenient, and Beit Shammai are more stringent. So we said when it comes to Simchat Yom Tov, who is of the opinion that you can waive a rabbinic prohibition in order to fulfill Simchat Yom Tov? So over here it seems like Beit Shammai says that. Here it seems like Beit Hillel says that, whereas previously they were stringent. And Beit Shammai also is reversed the other way around. That was the contradiction the Gemara asked. And then it said, actually, Mukhlefet Hashita. Rabbi Yochanan came along and said, no, you have to switch it around. In order so that there's not a contradiction, what we're saying over here is Beit Shammai is actually Beit Hillel. What we're saying is Beit Hillel is actually Beit Shammai. And then the Gemara said, wait a minute, you don't have to say Mukhlefet Hashita. Meaning it's not that there's a general principle going throughout Hilchot Yom Tov that Beit Shammai say you can waive the rabbinic prohibition for Simchat Yom Tov, but Hillel say you can't. No, these are specific cases. In that specific case, the example is in the first case, in the first Mishnah, why did Beit Shammai allow it? Beit Shammai allowed it because you had a deka notes mibod yom. Because actually we're dealing with a case where the sand was very, very fine, and you had the shovel stuck in the sand before, so there was no issue of muktzah. But Beit Hillel are still concerned over there that you might come to find a clod of earth and you'll actually be transgressed the prohibition of ktisha, of grinding it up. But Beit Shammai weren't concerned in that localized case. It doesn't mean that everywhere we have a case where it's a Simchat Yom Tov, Beit Shammai will allow it. That was what the Gemara said. And we went through, and therefore you don't necessarily have to say Mukhlefet Hashita. But we went through five different cases where of Machloket, Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel in Hilchot Yom Tov, and each one based on the same contradiction. We tried to say Mukhlefet Hashita, and we gave an answer why we don't actually have to say Mukhlefet Hashita. So let's pick it up. We're on Daf Yud Amud Alef. Let's go from the first of the wide lines. Okay, the first of the wide lines on about a third of the way down the page. This is the fourth kasha. We'll start from there. So halfway through the line, it says like this: Elai kasha ha kasha. If you're going to ask this contradiction between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, ask it as follows: Beit Shammai omrim ein notnin et ha'olif now dosan v'lo yagbieno ela imken yesh alav kazait basar u'Beit Hillel matirin. Okay, again, the case here is, so now you shechted an animal and you have the skin, and the skin needs to be processed in order to needs to be tanned, etc. That is going to be one of the malachot, which is forbidden to do on Shabbat and Yom Tov. So he says, don't place the skin on the floor somewhere where people are going to step on it. When people walk over it, it's one of the ways of tanning the leather, and then it will be the machloket. So Beit Shammai says you can't do that. You can't put it in a place where people are going to walk on it. Or you also, when you kill the animal and you cut off the skin, you can't lift it up because it's muktzah. Unless it has a kazait of flesh attached to it, in which case we know by the laws of ikar and tafel. So therefore the skin is going to be tafel to the flesh, which is not muktzah, because you can eat it on Yom Tov. You can cook it and eat it. And therefore that is Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai says, but the skin in and of itself, don't place it there and don't lift it up. Beit Hillel matirin, and Beit Hillel allow it. So we say, Alma gabei simchat Yom Tov, Beit Shammai lechumra, Beit Hillel lekula. Again, in other words, the point is, why are Beit Hillel allowing this? Because at this point, we think the following. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, Beit Hillel matirin, kasal kadata. At this point, we understand that this is the reason. Mishum simchat Yom Tov. What's this got to do with simchat Yom Tov? If you're not going to allow it, people won't come to the shechita in the first place. You're going to say, "Well, I'm not going to go if I shech this animal. I'm going to lose out. I'm not going to be able to preserve the skin, and I'm going to lose the money from that. Therefore, I'll wait until after Yom Tov, and then you're not going to have simchat Yom Tov. You're not going to have your meal." So we see from here that Beit Hillel are lenient regarding simchat Yom Tov, and Beit Shammai are not. Romania, and then we ask the question, well, that contradicts our first Mishnah, as we already explained, where it's the opposite way around. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mukhlef Tashita. So now, again, says the Gemara, maybe switch the opinions around. And then it says we don't need to switch the opinions around. Mimai. Dil maloi. Excuse me. Dil maloi ad kan lo kamri Beit Shammai hatam. Maybe in the first Mishnah, Beit Shammai only allow it because you have a deka naut, you have the shovel that's inserted into the ground before Yom Tov, and therefore there's no muktzah. But if you do not have it, they may not allow it. Inami. Alternatively, you can say from our Mishnah that we've just quoted, it's different. Ad kan lo kamri Beit Hillel hacha ela dechazi lemizga elave. Meaning maybe Beit Hillel only allowed it not just because of the reason of Simchat Yom Tov, but because these skins, think of it as a carpet. They would lean on them and they would sit on them. And therefore, in and of itself, it's not muktzah. Otherwise not. Okay, so the Gemara rejects that. So we don't have to say, again, all these cases, it's just proving that we don't have to say Mukhlef Tashita, but these are localized instances that we can't derive the general principle of Beit Shammai or Beit Hillel's opinion. Now, the final one, and there's going to be a bit of disagreement really amongst the Rishonim based on our Girsa as to whether this final one is accepted or not. But we say like this: Ela'i kasha akashan. Beit Shammai omrim ein mesalkin et trisin beyom tov uBeit Hillel matirin af lachzir. Okay, so what are we dealing with here? You had shops that could be open on Yom Tov. Now Rashi tells us, by the way, strictly speaking, a shop could be open on Yom Tov. A shop that's selling food. Right? Obviously, you can't come, you can't pay, you can't write anything down. But they could be these people could be out and selling their wares, and you come and you buy on credit, and you take your produce home for your Yom Tov meal. There's no prohibition with that. Brings to mind, by the way, again, we're dealing with Yom Tov and not Shabbat. Brings to mind the Rambam, the well-known Ramban, in Parshat Emor, where he talks about Shabbat, and he talks about the difference between Shabbat on a Doraita versus a Derabanan level. He says on a Doraita level, you can imagine Shabbat, you could have all the shops open and everybody puts out their wares and everybody comes and buys and you trade in money and you bring out all your things. And he gives us a whole picture of commerce operating to the fullest degree. And he says you wouldn't have transgressed a single malacha, but it wouldn't be Shabbat. Wouldn't be Shabbat. And therefore he says that would actually not be that would be a transgression of Shabbat on a biblical level. Beautiful Ramban in Parshat Emor. But in any case, here we're dealing with, so you have these shops and they have these trisin. Now we hear the word trisin, we think of the trisim that we have at home. These are slightly different. What the tris seems to be is that there would be a window in the shop, and the way that they would board up the window, they would have basically, I think it's metal or wood, but they would have a board that was the tris, which you would stick in the window, and when you would close up shop, and when you would open up shop, you would take it. This tris would be detached from the hinge. Later on, we're going to get into more detail about if it's one hinge, if it's got two hinges. It's not important for now. But they would actually use these boards as a tray. So they would take the board off from the window and they would put it down in the shop and put all the goods, on top. And so it's very compact and it's very useful. But the question is, can you insert or remove these trisin from the windows on Yom Tov? So again, Beit Shammai omrim ein mesalkin et trisin b'Yom Tov. Beit Shammai says you can't take them out. U'Beit Hillel matirin af lachzir. Now Beit Hillel allow you not just to take them out, but Beit Hillel allow you to put them back. Okay, so there may be a machloket in terms of taking it out, whether there's a malacha or there's not a malacha. But putting them back, when the shop is finished, that certainly serves no purpose of Yom Tov. And that might be, we might think that's a tircha shelo letzorech. But what Beit Hillel, what we understand at this point, that what Beit Hillel is trying to teach us, is that why are we allowing this? Again, like we saw in the previous case, that you want to allow if you don't allow them to pack up shop, right, and close off the trisim, then maybe they won't open in the first place, and maybe you will prevent Simchat Yom Tov. But in order to allow it and to allow everybody to get their food and to perform this, will allow even to put the trisim back, even though it's a tircha shelo letzorech. Okay, have a look at Rashi. Rashi says trisin, tzadatot achalonot, these boards, these doors of the windows, shel chanuyot of the shop, shesolglin ben achalonot balayla, that would use them to close up the windows at night. Umesalkin otam bayom, they take them out during the day. V'notnin otam nifnehem, and they place them in front of the shop. V'shotchin elen tavlin, and they place all their goods on top. Nimkol rabim, in order to sell. Ubayom tov mutar, and now Rashi just tells us parenthetically, Bayom tov mutar likach mechen vani amakir oto. Go to a shopkeeper who knows you, and you can purchase from him on Yom Tov. That's fine. So long as you don't explicitly mention how much you're going to pay. Now, Aflach Zir continues Rashi, Lizgor ba'en b'chazara vadai shelo latzorech, to close them up again. That is certainly not tzorech Yom Tov. And even if we say there's no binyan b'kelim, we'll explain in a moment, but even if we say there's no melacha that's being performed, nonetheless, tircha delav tzorech mi'ahava. It is a tircha. You are exerting yourself for no purpose on Yom Tov. But we allow it in order that people won't come not to open the shop in the first place. And therefore we see that we are here going to be maker, we're going to be lenient for the sake of Simchat Yom Tov. The kasha Beit Hillel, the kisui, and that is the kasha on Beit Hillel, because in the previous Mishnah regarding kisui Adam, he's not lenient for Simchat Yom Tov. So, right, Alma Gabe Simchat Yom Tov Beit Shammai lechumra Beit Hillel lekula. Back in the Gemara, it says Ramini hashochetet chayavov b'yom tov v'chulei. Okay, so now the way the Gemara answers this is a little bit different to the ways we answered previously. Previously we said muchlefet hashita, let's switch them around, and then we gave an explanation why it's not necessary to machlef hashita. Here the Gemara is going to try and give an explanation first, and when that explanation is not satisfactory, it's then going to say, okay, switch them around. Okay, so we say like this: Bishlama, it makes sense the following. Beit Shammai lo kasha. There's no machloket, there's no contradiction in the opinion of Beit Shammai. Why? Because we could say the answer we've already said 4 times. Hatam diika dekenaots, hachaleka dekenaots. Right? Beit Shammai were only lenient where you weren't actually transgressing anything, and therefore, right over here, Beit Shammai don't say you can put it back. Beit Shammai say you can't do anything. So that's fine. Beit Shammai were only lenient where you had a dekanaotz, but where you weren't, and there was going to be a transgression, there would not be. Ela Beit Hillel kasha, but we're still left with a contradiction in the opinion of Beit Hillel. Are they lenient for Simchat Yom Tov, or are they not lenient for Simchat Yom Tov? So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan muchlefet hashita. Says yes, we have to change the opinion, and over here we have to switch around Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. So it works out that Beit Hillel are the ones who are consistent and actually are going to be stringent in Simchat Yom Tov. That's if we say that we're switching them around here. There are other Rishonim who say we have to switch around their opinions in the first mission. Now, according to some Rishonim, this is where the Gemara ends. If there are many Gisaot where where this is where the Gemara finishes, and if this is where the Gemara finishes, then we say the conclusion is that yes, we accept the fact that we switch around the opinions of Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. But you'll see in your Gemarot that there are a few more lines, and other Rishonim have this girsa as well. And if we carry on, then we actually reject this idea of switching them around. And here too, like in the previous cases, we can find a resolution for Beit Hillel. Says the Gemara, Kan lo kamrei Beit Hillel acha ela mishum de'ein binyan b'kelim ve'ein stira b'kelim aval hatam lo. Meaning over here, why are Beit Hillel lenient? It's got to do with the fact that there is no melacha d'oraita being transgressed, because again, when you move these trisim and you attach them back, we're dealing with the melacha of binyan, of constructing, of deconstructing, and these are not attached to the ground. Therefore, it's what's called kelim. It's a vessel that's not connected to the ground. There is a machloket throughout Shas whether we say yesh binyan v'stira b'kelim or ein stira v'binyan b'kelim. According to this, we would say ein binyan b'kelim v'ein stira b'kelim, and therefore there is no machloket. That, by the way, is going to be very, very difficult with Rashi, because we've explained the Gemara until now, according to Rashi, where we explained that the contradiction was not just about the fact that you can put the trisim back, that you can remove the trisim, but that you can put them back, even if there's no machloket, even if you say, ein binyan ve'ein stira b'kelim. Rashi told us, what's the issue here? That it's a tircha shelo letzorech. There's no malacha, but it's still lo letzorech yom tov. And that's why we had to say muchlef tashita. And that's why maybe Rashi does not have this girsa of this last line. It's difficult to resolve how this actually solves the problem, according to the way that we explained. But anyway, adkan. So that is that section of the Gemara. We're now on to the next Mishnah, a little bit past halfway down the Amud, and we're continuing to talk about these birds. Remember, we spoke about dovecotes. We spoke about a person going up and moving the ladder, etc. Now, another question that comes up is that, so a person has a dovecote, there's lots of different birds, and he wants to bring, now they're all muktzah. You want to go and you want to bring one or two that you want to shecht and eat for your Yom Tov meal. So before Yom Tov, you need to designate them in order that they will not be muktzah. How do you do that? Says the Mishnah. Beit Shammai omrim, lo yitor elam ken niyanea mibod yom. Ubeit Hillel omrim, omed veomer, ze veze ani noter. So again, we have machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai says, and Beit Shammai is more stringent, yeah? We saw this Mishnah previously, by the way, when the Gemara was going through the different machlokot, so it quoted some of these Mishnayot. So Beit Shammai omrim, lo yitor elam ken niyanea mibod yom. You have to go during the day, okay? And you have to, before Yom Tov, and you have to pick up the bird that you want to eat. That's the only way that you can remove its muktzah designation from. Beit Hillel omrim, omed veomer. Rashi points out that Beit Hillel is also talking about an Erev Yom Tov. Beit Hillel say, you stand and you say, ze v'ze ani noter. According to Beit Hillel, it's enough to just point and say, I want this one and I want that one. According to Beit Shammai, no, you have to go and pick it up. Right? Beit Shammai are concerned that if you don't go and you haven't picked up the bird in the first place, that when you come to pick it up, you'll look at it, you'll say, actually, I don't want to shecht this bird, and therefore you're going to end up having carried muktzah for no reason. Beit Hillel are not concerned for that. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Chanan bar Ami, machloket bevrecha rishona. The Beit Shammai Savri Gazrinan Dir Ma'ati Lemluche, Ubeit Hillel Savri Lo Gazrinan. Aval Bevrecha Shniya Divrei Hakol Be'omed Ve'omer Ze V'ze Ani Noter Sagya. Okay, so says Rav Chanan bar Ami. We saw Rav Chanan bar Ami previously as well. He comes along to qualify the machloket for us, and he says as follows. The machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel as to whether you have to go and lift up the birds, or you can just point and say, I'm just taking these. Where is the machloket? He's machloket bevrecha rishonat, with the first set. Okay? What do we mean? What does it mean, brecha rishonah? Says Rashi, brecha rishonah, derech megadlei yonim, laniach brecha rishonah shakol shana liot sevet le'ima. In other words, he says those who raise the birds, what they do, the brecha, is talking about the first offspring of the year, that generally speaking, those they would leave. They would not take those and not separate them. They would leave them together with the mother, the first set of birds that is born in the year. Generally speaking, it's that, let's carry on, Rashi. He says, Gazrinan, he says, Ki shakilu lamacha, I mean, we're worried that when you pick them up, according to Beit Shammai, if you hadn't picked them up before, so when you pick them up on Yom Tov, you're going to have mercy on them and you're not going to want to shech them. You're carrying them for no reason. L'shchita, if you had gone and you picked them up and prepared them for shchita before Yom Tov, and you picked them up and you didn't decide, okay, these are cute birds that I'm going to keep. That's fine. That's enough. We're not worried it's going to happen later. Now here Rashi explains what is a brecha. COVID bela'az. Okay, not COVID-19, but that's the word in Old French for this brecha. It's called a COVID. Shayonim yodim brecha b'chol chodesh v'chodesh. Each month they would give birth to another what's called brecha, which is vein shnei gozalot. It's two birds, zachar and nekeva. There'll be a male and a female. Umafsikim b'tkufat tevet v'chozrin v'yodin b'nisan. Okay, apparently that is the way it works. That throughout these months until Tevet, and it's starting again in Nisan, so it's only in the summer months and not in the winter months. But they would give birth to a male and a female, a pair of birds, and each pair like that is called a brecha. So the way it would be that those who are raising the birds would leave the first one of the season, that first pair, they would not take, and they would not separate from the mother birds. So it says again, the Gemara says like this: the whole machloket between
what would happen on a leap year? The Yonim know it's a leap year, so it's not going to be Nisan. It's going to be.
The truth is, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah has a whole discussion about how we work out when the Yibur Shana is, and it's based on psukim that are related to the it's related to the Maaser Be'emah. When we start the year, and it's related to the psukim there, which talks about what happens in which months the animals give birth, etc. We'll seem to know. I don't know, but I don't know what happens there. I was pointing out to you, actually, if you have, I don't know if you have the Lo Azeh Rashi. Some of the Gemara have them on the side. There's a Lo Azeh Rashi, which is a translation of the words that Rashi brings in Laz in Old French. So here he translates brecha as COVID. It says here in my Gemara, the Lo Azeh Rashi, Pelush brecha, Masha yonim yodim chol chodesh, shnei gozalot zachar nekeva. Right, that's the same really that the Rashi writes here. That's what this brecha means. So says Rav Chanan Bar Ami, this machloket between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai only relates to if you decide to go and take these birds from this brecha rishona, because normally you don't take those birds, and normally you wouldn't check them. So there, says the Gemara, Beit Shammai savri gazrin and dilmati lamluche. They are more. You're going to go. You're going to pick them up. You're going to say, actually, no. What am I doing? I need to leave these behind. Beit Hillel savri lo gazrin, and Beit Hillel say, no, we don't make that gzera. But when it comes to from the second brecha and onwards, those other birds, which it is customary to go and to take them and to shech them, that's fine. So there, so they would say divrei hakol according to everybody, both Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. It's enough to just stand and point to them and say, I'm going to take these. Okay, says the Gemara. Now a question. It says Beit Hillel, why? Right. The whole point was Beit Shammai was the one who said it's not enough to just stand there and point. You have to go and physically you have to pick up the birds and you have to know exactly which ones. Beit Hillel said that's not necessary. Beit Hillel said you could just go and say Zev Zani Notel. So now the Gemara says even that. Why do you have to do it according to Beit Hillel? Lama leila meima Zev Zani Notel. Why can't you just say, I'm taking from here? Why do you have to point to the specific birds? Why can't you just say, you're not going to pick up the specific birds? So you could just say, from the staff code, I'm going to take the birds on Yom Tov. That's the question. And now we're going to get into a whole discussion. The Gemara says, you might say that the Beit Hillel don't hold by the principle of Breira, and now we're going to have a long discussion, proof, to figure out whether they hold by Breira or not. So that is the topic of our Gemara, which has come up once before. We didn't really discuss it, but it has come up once before in the Masechet, and will come up a few more times. The concept of Breira, right? In modern Hebrew, you say ain't Breira. There's no choice, but that's not. But it means something slightly different. Throughout Shas, again, we have a machloka, which is, do we say yesh b'leila or ein b'leila? B'leila means like a Breirat Mechdal in modern Hebrew is the default position. Borer is to select something. So we have Borer, which is one of the 39 melachot of Yom Tov. Okay, we're not talking about that melacha when we talk about Breira. What we're talking about is when you choose something, when something then happens later on that retroactively clarifies what it was referring to. That is the concept of Breira. And the question is whether that is acceptable halachically or not. That is a machloket throughout Shas. Yesh brera or ein brera. So in our case, the question would be as follows, right? Can a person stand in the dafkar and say, I'm taking the birds from here tomorrow. I'm taking 2 birds. Now let's say there are 10 birds in there, okay? And I say, I'm taking 2. You don't decide which ones. You don't point at the ones that you want. And then on Yom Tov, you come out and you take 2 birds. So those 2 birds, okay, are they muktzeh? No, because you said yesterday that you were going to take those 2 birds. But you didn't say you were going to take those 2 birds. You said you were going to take 2 of the birds. So when you take them, then it becomes clear, it becomes clarified retroactively that my intention was for these 2 birds and not for the other 8. The other 8 remain muktzeh, and these 2 are not muktzeh. But I didn't know that until now. At the time when I said I'm taking from here, and it's only when I take it, it becomes clarified what my intention was for which one. And this comes up in Alachot Masal Matan, it comes up in Alachot of maybe of Truma, all different places. The question is, can we say that is called Breira? Do we say Yesh Breira or Ein Breira? So if we say that Beit Hillel don't hold by the principle of Breira, well, then we understand why you can't say Mikan ani notel, because you have to select specifically now which ones it is. What the Gemara is going to try and suggest, the Gemara is going to say that you can't say Beit Hillel don't hold by the principle of Breira, because we're going to see a proof that they actually do hold by it. And if that's the case, then we don't understand why they can't just come and say Mikan ani notel macha. Okay, that's that's where we're going to go. That's what we'll pick up with tomorrow morning. Zrat Hashem.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good day, everybody.